The old house stood at the edge of a quiet village, its tall, dark windows staring out like eyes, watching the land around it. Overgrown vines crawled up its walls, and the roof seemed to buckle under the weight of years of neglect. Locals avoided the place, whispering tales of strange happenings and unexplained events that made even the bravest soul shiver. But David didn't believe in such things. He had bought the house for a fresh start with his new wife Claire and his daughter Emily. Claire had never felt truly at home in the house. From the moment they moved in, an unsettling chill lingered in the air, as if the very walls were hiding something. She tried to ignore it, convincing herself it was just her imagination. After all, moving in with a new family was hard enough without worrying about a creaky old house. But there was something about the place that didn't feel right. Emily, David's young daughter from his first marriage, seemed distant. She rarely spoke to Claire and spent most of her time alone, clutching an old photograph of her mother Sarah, who had passed away under mysterious circumstances. Claire had tried her best to bond with Emily, but the girl's cold attitude made her feel more like an outsider. David, caught between his daughter and his new wife, struggled to keep peace in the family. He often reassured Claire, saying she just needs time to adjust. But time wasn't enough. Claire started noticing small, strange things happening around the house. Doors would creak open on their own, even when there was no wind. Lights would flicker just as she walked by, leaving her in brief moments of darkness. At night, she could hear soft footsteps echoing through the hallways. But every time she checked, no one was there. The feeling of being watched grew stronger each day, and Claire couldn't shake the sensation that someone or something was keeping an eye on her every move. Emily, on the other hand, seemed unaffected by the strange occurrences. In fact, she would sometimes stare at the old photograph of her mother and talk quietly to it. Claire overheard her once whispering, "Mommy says she doesn't want you here." The words sent a chill down Claire's spine, but when she asked Emily about it, the girl just smiled and said nothing. David dismissed Claire's concerns as simple stress from adjusting to a new life. "It's an old house," he would say. "These things happen." But Claire wasn't so sure. There was something far more sinister at play, something connected to Sarah, David's first wife, whose presence still seemed to linger in the house. Claire could feel it, even if David refused to acknowledge it. Little did she know, the haunting had only just begun. Days passed, and the house's eerie atmosphere grew heavier around Claire. What began as minor oddities quickly escalated into unsettling events she could no longer ignore. Late one evening, while sitting alone in the living room, she heard soft whispers coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was Emily talking in her room, but when she called out her name, the whispers stopped. Claire stood up and walked toward the hallway, her heart beating faster with each step. There was no one there. The silence that followed was more unnerving than the whispers themselves. Emily's behavior also became stranger. She often sat for hours in front of the old photo of Sarah, murmuring to it like it was alive. Whenever Claire entered the room, Emily would stop talking, her gaze cold and distant. One evening, as Claire was preparing dinner, Emily stood in the doorway, staring at her with those same empty eyes. "Mommy says you don't belong here," she said in a flat, emotionless voice before turning and walking away. Claire felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that Emily wasn't just being difficult. Something was influencing her, something that shouldn't be there. The tension between Claire and David started to grow as well. Claire tried to explain what she was experiencing, but David refused to believe her. "You're just stressed. It's a new house, a new life. You'll get used to it," he said dismissively, brushing off her concerns. Claire felt isolated, left alone to deal with the creeping sense of dread that haunted her every step. The coldness of the house seemed to seep into her home, and she felt more unwelcome than ever. One night, the air in the house felt heavier than usual. Claire lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She could hear the faint creaking of the old wooden floors outside the bedroom. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, as if a door had slammed shut. Claire jumped out of bed, her heart racing. She crept down the hallway and saw that the door to the attic was slightly ajar, though she remembered clearly it had been locked earlier that day. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, but just as she touched it, a freezing gust of wind blew through the crack, sending a shiver down her spine. The house felt alive, its dark corners hiding secrets Claire wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. The more she tried to explain these experiences to David, the more he pulled away, growing irritated with her constant worries. "You're letting this house get to you," he said. "There's nothing wrong here." But Claire knew better. She could feel it deep in her bones. Something was terribly wrong. And whatever it was, it had begun to turn Emily against her. The nights in the house grew colder, and the strange occurrences became impossible for Claire to ignore. One evening, as she lay in bed, drifting off to sleep, a faint voice whispered her name, "Claire." Her eyes snapped open, but the room was silent. She sat up, her breath quickening. Was it her imagination? The voice had been so clear, so close. The air in the room felt icy, and a strange sensation crawled down her spine. Suddenly, she heard it again, louder this time. "Claire!" The voice seemed to come from above her. She looked toward the ceiling and noticed something she hadn't before. A small door leading to the attic, slightly cracked open. Claire hesitated but knew she had to investigate. The attic had been locked since they moved in, and yet there it was, inviting her with its dark, yawning entrance. Grabbing a flashlight, Claire slowly climbed the creaking stairs, her heart pounding with each step. As she pushed open the door, a thick layer of dust greeted her, swirling in the dim beam of light. The attic smelled of age, forgotten memories, and something else, something sharp and bitter, like the scent of decay. She swept the flashlight across the room and froze when the beam landed on an old chest in the corner. It was covered in cobwebs and looked as if it hadn't been touched in years. Yet something about it felt familiar, as if it were waiting for her. She crouched down, hands trembling, as she opened the chest. Inside were mementos from David's first wife, Sarah. An old wedding dress, yellowed with age, a stack of letters tied together with a ribbon, and at the bottom a small lockbox. As Claire reached for the box, she felt a sudden chill behind her, a cold breath against her neck. She spun around, her flashlight flickering wildly in the dark. For a split second, she thought she saw a figure, just a shadow standing by the attic door. But when the light steadied, it was gone. Claire's heart raced. She grabbed the box and hurried out of the attic, slamming the door behind her. Whatever was happening, it was getting worse. The next morning, she tried to talk to David about what she had found, but he brushed her off again. "Sarah was part of the past. You're overthinking things," he said, barely looking up from his phone. Claire felt the frustration rising in her chest. She wasn't overthinking anything. There was something wrong with this house, and Sarah was at the heart of it. Later that day, as Claire sat in the living room, she overheard Emily talking to the photograph of her mother again. This time, it wasn't just a whisper. "Mom says she's angry. She says you're not good enough to be here," Emily said, her voice eerily calm. Claire's blood ran cold. Emily turned to face her, eyes dark and empty, a small smile curling on her lips. "She doesn't want you here." Claire tried to shake off the growing fear, but the signs were becoming clearer. Sarah's presence was growing stronger, and it wasn't just affecting the house, it was influencing Emily. The once sweet and innocent girl now seemed possessed by an anger that wasn't her own. And every day, it felt as if Sarah's spirit was getting closer, pushing Claire out, trying to take back the family she had lost. That night, Claire lay in bed, the small locked box from the attic resting on the nightstand. She hadn't dared open it yet, but deep down, she knew it held answers. Whatever was inside would reveal Sarah's true intentions. But as Claire drifted into a restless sleep, she felt a presence looming over her, a figure standing at the foot of the bed, watching. She tried to move, but her body felt paralyzed, frozen in place by an unseen force. In the dim light of the room, Claire saw a shadow tall and thin, with long, tangled hair and a pale face twisted in rage. It was Sarah. The vengeful ghost was no longer a distant memory or a whisper in the dark. She was here, and she wasn't going to leave without taking what was hers. The next morning, Claire awoke in a cold sweat, her heart racing from the nightmare. She felt exhausted, as if the ghostly encounter had drained her energy. Determined to understand what was happening, she decided to open the lockbox from the attic. Claire knew she needed answers, and whatever was inside might hold the key to stopping Sarah's haunting. As she fumbled with the tiny lock, the memory of Sarah's twisted face lingered in her mind. Finally, with a sharp tug, the box sprang open. Inside, she found a collection of letters and a small journal. The pages were yellowed and fragile, but Claire carefully unfolded them, her breath catching as she began to read. The letters were addressed to David, written by Sarah before her death. They spoke of her deep love for him, but they also revealed a dark obsession. Sarah wrote about her fears of losing David and how she couldn't bear the thought of him moving on with another woman. Claire's stomach twisted as she realized that Sarah's love had turned into something much darker. The last letter was particularly chilling. It detailed a desperate ritual Sarah had planned to perform to ensure her family would remain together forever, even if it meant death. As Claire flipped through the journal, she found passages filled with anguished thoughts about her life slipping away. The final entry described her fear of losing David and the lengths she was willing to go to keep him. Claire felt a wave of dread wash over her as she realized that Sarah had cursed the house with her dying breath, vowing to haunt anyone who threatened to take her place. Just then, Emily walked into the room, her expression blank. Claire quickly hid the letters, but it was too late. Emily had seen the box and without hesitation reached for it. "Mommy wants to know what you're hiding," she said, her voice eerily calm. Claire felt her heart drop. The girl was no longer just a child. She was a vessel for Sarah's anger. "Emily, honey, Claire began, but before she could finish, Emily's demeanor shifted. She turned and walked out of the room, mumbling, "You're not welcome here." The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Claire alone with the chilling realization that Sarah's spirit had taken complete control over Emily. Panic surged through Claire. She had to act quickly to protect her family from the vengeful ghost that was tightening its grip. That night, as shadows crept across the walls, Claire sought the help of a local medium she had heard about, a woman known for her ability to communicate with spirits. Desperate for answers, Claire called her, hoping to uncover a way to break Sarah's hold on Emily. The medium arrived the next day, bringing a heavy air of mystery with her. She began to set up, creating a circle of candles and placing a small crystal in the center. As Claire explained the situation, the medium listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There is a powerful spirit here," she finally said. "A spirit filled with rage and sorrow. To free your daughter, you must confront the ghost in the very place where she died." Claire felt a shiver of fear at the thought. The attic, where Sarah's presence was strongest, was now a place of dread. But she knew it was the only way to save Emily and herself. The medium instructed her to gather Sarah's belongings from the attic and bring them back for a ritual that could potentially free Emily from the ghost's grasp. That night, Claire made her way to the attic, her heart pounding. She collected the wedding dress, the letters, and the locked box. As she stood in the center of the attic, shadows danced around her, and she could feel Sarah's spirit lurking, waiting for her. The air grew thick, and a whisper echoed in the darkness. "You shouldn't have come here." With the items gathered, Claire began the ritual as instructed. She spoke softly, asking Sarah to reveal her true feelings and to understand that David had moved on. But as she uttered the words, a cold wind swept through the attic, and Sarah's ghost appeared, more furious than ever. "You will never take my place," Sarah screamed, her face twisted in anger. "This is my family." The walls shook with her rage, and Claire could feel the force pushing her back. Desperation surged within her, and she called out to Emily, who was waiting outside. "I love you, Emily. I will always love you." The spirit's anger flared, and for a moment, Claire thought she saw a flicker of recognition in Sarah's eyes. But the rage returned, overwhelming the moment. Claire knew she had to break through to Sarah before it was too late, before she lost everything. As the air thickened with tension, Claire stood her ground, clutching the wedding dress and letters tightly in her hands. "Sarah, please, you don't have to do this. You can find peace." Her voice trembled, but she pushed through her fear. The ghost loomed closer, her presence so cold it made Claire's breath visible in the dark. "Peace? You think I can find peace while you take my place?" Sarah's voice echoed through the attic, filled with rage and sorrow. "You don't belong here. This is my home, my family." "I understand your pain," Claire pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "But David loves me now. Emily needs us both. You're hurting her." The words hung in the air, heavy with the truth Claire hoped would reach the spirit. For a moment, silence enveloped the attic. The shadows danced around them, and Claire could feel the weight of Sarah's sorrow pressing down on her. Suddenly, Emily appeared at the top of the stairs, her small figure silhouetted against the dim light. "Mommy," she called, her voice breaking the stillness. Claire felt a surge of hope. "Emily, come here, I need you." But as Emily stepped forward, Sarah's ghost reacted violently. "No, she's mine," Sarah screamed, a whirlwind of energy swirling around her, and Emily stumbled back, fear etched on her face. "Mommy, I'm scared," Emily cried out, tears streaming down her cheeks. Claire felt her heart break at the sight. "I'm here, sweetheart. Just stay close to me." Claire reached out, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to show Sarah that we can help her move on." With all her strength, Claire turned to the ghost again. "Sarah, listen. Your daughter needs you to let go. You're scaring her. You can't keep holding on to this anger." The ghost hesitated, a flicker of recognition crossing her features. In that moment, Claire took a deep breath and began to speak softly about the love David had for Sarah and how much she had once meant to him. "You were a wonderful mother, and you still are, but holding on to this anger isn't the way. Let Emily remember you with love, not fear." The ghost's expression shifted, the anger beginning to wane as sorrow took its place. "I don't want to be forgotten," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Claire could see the struggle within the spirit, the conflict between love and rage. "Yes, but you don't have to haunt her to be remembered," Claire said gently. "You can guide her, protect her. Let your love shine through instead of this pain." The words resonated in the air, wrapping around Sarah like a warm embrace. Just then, the attic filled with a blinding light. Claire shielded her eyes, feeling a rush of energy as the shadows began to recede. "Mommy," Emily cried again, stepping forward. "I love you. Please don't be sad." Sarah's ghost faltered, her form flickering. The darkness that surrounded her began to dissolve, revealing the beauty of the woman she had once been. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, tears streaming down her ethereal face. "I didn't mean to hurt you." With those words, the chilling grip of fear loosened its hold on Claire and Emily. They reached out together, hand in hand, as Sarah's spirit slowly began to fade. "Remember me with love," Sarah said, her voice now soft and filled with warmth. "I will always watch over you." As the last remnants of her ghostly form disappeared, a sense of calm washed over the attic. The air felt lighter, and the coldness that had once settled in the house began to lift. Claire turned to Emily, who looked up at her with wide-eyed eyes, tears still glistening. "Mommy, is she gone?" Emily asked, her voice small. Claire knelt down, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Yes, sweetheart, but she will always be with us in our hearts." They stood together in the fading light, feeling a new warmth fill the space where fear had once lived. Though the past would always be a part of them, they had faced the darkness together, finding strength in their love and the promise of a fresh start. As they left the attic behind, Claire knew that they could finally move forward, unshackled from the chains of the past. But as they descended the stairs, a flicker of light lingered in the attic, a gentle reminder that love can conquer even the deepest of sorrows. The days that followed felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from the house. Claire and Emily spent more time together, rebuilding their bond and creating new memories. The house, once filled with darkness and fear, slowly transformed into a warm home filled with laughter and love. David noticed the change too. He saw how much closer Claire and Emily had become, and for the first time he felt at peace in their new home. The flickering lights and creaking doors had ceased, replaced by the soft sounds of family life. The haunting presence that had once loomed over them was now a memory, fading into the past. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Emily picked up the old photograph of her mother. She smiled at it, a soft light in her eyes. "Mommy, I hope you're happy now," she said softly. Claire watched her daughter, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. Sarah's spirit had found peace, and Emily was learning to cherish her mother's memory rather than fear it. But just as Claire felt a sense of normalcy returning, she caught a glimpse of something in the corner of her eye, a fleeting shadow passing by the window. Her heart raced as she turned, but when she looked, nothing was there. It was a reminder that the past could never truly be forgotten. Though the ghost of Sarah had moved on, the echoes of her presence would always linger in the house. As time passed, Claire learned to embrace the memory of Sarah as part of their family story. On quiet nights, she would sit with Emily and tell her stories about her mother, sharing the love that had once filled their home. They talked about Sarah's laughter, her kindness, and the love she had for David and Emily. One night, as they finished a story, a gentle breeze swept through the room, causing the curtains to flutter. Claire smiled, feeling a warmth envelop her, as if Sarah was watching over them, smiling at their newfound happiness. "We're okay, Mom," Emily whispered, glancing at the photograph. "We're really okay." And in that moment, Claire knew that while the past could hold shadows, it could also hold light. Love was stronger than fear, and memories could be transformed into something beautiful. They had faced the darkness together and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. As they settled into bed that night, Claire felt a sense of peace. She knew the house would always carry the echoes of its history, but it was now a place of love, a sanctuary where they could grow and heal. With Emily by her side and the memories of Sarah transformed into a gentle presence, Claire was ready to move forward, no longer haunted but forever connected by the bonds of family and love.